Joe. Next up, we have Amy Feind Reeves.
Okay. All right. On May 31st, 1942, Feind's plane crashed 160 miles off New Caledonia after a long bombing raid on Guadalcanal. The lieutenant and his crew were in lifeboats for 6 hours before they reached an island. Quote, "Natives met us," Feind said, "and led us across the island. At every village, there is a celebration. The women gathered in the middle of the village, and we had to shake hands with each of them. Then they followed us singing, of all things, a Bach Mass, which missionaries had taught them," end quote. Navy planes soon found Feind and his crew, and they were flown back to New Caledonia. That's an excerpt from a 1944 interview with my father for the Newark Star-Ledger, his hometown newspaper, which my grandmother saved and framed. He never spoke of battle experiences to us, but we did hear a lot about the women he dated in Honolulu and how it was awkward as an elite tennis player but a mid-level naval officer to be drafted into playing doubles against Admiral Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet. I share this story for a couple of reasons. First is I find it helps when you're flying an airline where you don't have any status with perspective. The second is that it has given me hope when my life has crashed in the past, which it has. The understanding that maybe it's not the crash that it is important, but how I react to it. And that maybe, just maybe, something amazing will be found in what is lost. As Tuckies, we are part of a culture of success and abundance, of hard work that with a little luck turns into opportunity and privilege for ourselves and for our families. Success, in my experience, we don't really talk about the crashes. Success is highlighted and celebrated in every issue of Tuck Today, as it should be. But we all have friends who are missing today either because they crashed, never took off, or simply don't feel comfortable coming to reunion because of where they are in their lives or in their careers. I'd like to tell my story in hopes that we can all feel more comfortable connecting with each other in a real way, rather than just sharing our successes and our memories. My first test as the pilot of my own life came just after my post-college commercial bank training program in 1986. My first year as a lending officer, my boss turned to me at the Christmas party and said, "I feel sorry for you because I don't think you can do as good a job in your role as a man could." Crash. As a little background, that was the year the price of oil fell from $40 a barrel to $14, and a significant portion of the portfolio of the oil, gas, and extractive industries division of my bank went south and the lending staff let go. Suddenly, I was responsible for a 10-state West Coast region that included accounts like Arco, Unocal, and Chevron. If you can imagine, the treasurers of these companies had to have lunch with me, a 23-year-old blonde, every quarter who was selling lockboxes. To my boss's point, I had inadvertently become the first woman in the bank's 200-year history to be in the oil, gas, and extractive industries division. But meanwhile, I was flying first class to LA every month, and I had never even been west of Pennsylvania. I decided to stay and forget the common ever happened. I flew in a Learjet, I visited copper mines, I learned blackjack from the CFO of a gold mining company, and when I left for Tuck, the treasurer of Occidental Petroleum took me on a private tour of Arm & Hammer's personal art collection, which included Da Vinci's 1490 drawing of the Vitruvian Man, then part of the Hammer Codex, and now the Gates Codex. I'm not advocating anybody else take this approach to blatant sexism, but when I left, that same boss told me I had surprised him by the good job I had done and gave me a bottle of Dom Perignon. 3 years after Tuck, I was heavily recruited to a boutique consulting firm where after 10 weeks of working on a project that really could not be done the way the owner had sold it, I was summarily fired. Crash. I easily tell people now that it was due to a disagreement with the owner. I thought I was really smart, and he didn't. But at the time, it was devastating. I didn't jump right back into consulting. This time I fled the country to take on a due diligence project in Northern Ireland. My mother didn't like me living in the most bombed hotel in the world, the Belfast Europa, but on the upside, the bathrooms were quite modern for Ireland. I came back and found a role where I was much happier. I met two partners, one at T’92, with whom I would eventually start and sell a small firm of our own. Being fired is not an experience I would wish on anyone else, but it is one which I draw on now when I work with my career coaching clients going through similar circumstances. Of course, lots of wonderful things were happening to me in these years as well. The most wonderful was when at age 40, while on the pill for medical reasons other than birth control, because I was told I couldn't have children, I found myself pregnant with my Mary. Shortly after she turned 2, however, I found myself looking to use my seat as a flotation device once again. My father's second actual plane crash into the Pacific makes a pretty good analogy for what I had no idea was coming. And to quote again, Feind has a citation that credits him for saving the lives of all personnel in his flight crew that came after a crash near Canton Island when motor trouble and fire occurred just as the plane took off. Quote, "There was a 20-foot sea," Feind recalled. "One of my plane's wheels was up, one was down. An engine fell out, and the ship was afire. And we had a load of bombs and depth charges aboard." So if you can imagine what that felt like for a minute, you can imagine what it felt like for me over the course of a year when, 1, Mary's father decided, and what was a complete surprise to me, that our marriage was over. 2, the former client where I had been working for 9 years was sold, and all the senior management were let go. And 3, my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. So yeah, wheels not working, ship afire, and depth charges aboard. I don't know how my father got out of that alive, but I did it with the help of a kick-ass babysitter who has since become part of my family, putting my organizational skills into hyperdrive, and this guy that John Horowitz watched his dog with, who had just bought a pharmaceutical research firm in Boston and put me in charge of 3 of his East Coast offices. And they let me just travel 1 night a week, which was the night that Mary spent with her dad. So I actually got very lucky. About a year after my mother was gone, and things had settled down into a new normal, my friends urged me to start going out again, saying that if I wanted Mary to be happy, then I needed to be happy. Actually, what they said was that they were scared by the fact that I was crafting on alternate weekends, and they didn't want any more tote bags or mittens. But I got the message and was very lucky to meet my husband. And soon afterwards, no longer felt like it was just me and Mary, but that we were a family. People started telling me they had never seen me happier. Cue the natives singing a Bach Mass. Over the years, friends, both Tuck and non-Tuck, have sometimes seemed embarrassed around me or seemed to be afraid that my circumstances would be contagious if they brought up any of the experiences I've been through. I know this is simply because we don't know how to react to perceived failure or hardship the way we do to success. This is why I come before you today to tell my story without pretense. Life happens to all of us. In one way or another, we all have our disappointments or our achievements, and we learn equally from both. My hope is that we don't isolate ourselves during the bad times or present a facade that prevents us from really connecting. This weekend, we all grieve for the classmates we have lost, and we celebrate the classmates we know about, whose careers we know about because their successes have come across PR Newswire. It is the in-between places where I hope we do not isolate ourselves from each other. It's life's delays, the reroutings, and the canceled flights that are hard to share but difficult to bear. As a great Norwegian philosopher and moose killer we all know once said to me, "Trouble shared is trouble halved, and joy shared is joy doubled." For the next 25 years, I hope we all live the lives we write about in Tuck today and post on Facebook. But in the unlikely event of a water landing, I hope we can all choose connection over isolation, choose to show up for one another instead of sitting those times out, choose to shake hands with all the villagers on the island instead of cowering on the raft until the Navy planes arrive. Thank you.